That life you always wanted, but you didn't know. 'Cause you didn't know.
Hello and welcome to the Kalamazoo Church of Christ podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We're a startup church we just planted in September 2020. And at the Kalamazoo Church, we believe that Christianity is done best when it is done together. And so if you live in the Kalamazoo area, we would love to connect. Be it coming to a Sunday service, one of our small groups, or even just grabbing coffee with a member to learn more. You can visit kalamazoo.church in order to do that. We pray that you are inspired by what you hear today.
Amen. Very cool. Well, you guys can open up your Bibles to Mark 6. I do want to just start by saying we've got a little gallery here, the Peanut Gallery. Hopefully you guys can see it there. So if there's a little bit of laughter or amens, that's great. I know it definitely helps me to connect with God. I do also want to just open up the opportunity. Please use the Facebook chat as a chance just for you to type in anything thoughtful, any kind of things that you connect with. I know that clearly we're not able to, or we're choosing not to worship in person right now, but please go ahead and use that Facebook chat as an opportunity to connect and to kind of throw some ideas or different thoughts. I do also want to welcome the family group in Edmonton, Canada. We're super grateful that you decided to join us. Hopefully we can all pull a little bit out of the lesson this morning. And we're over here in Mark 6, and we're actually going to talk about something that it's a story that's super well known certainly throughout Christianity, but I would say it's one of the most well-known stories, even if you talk to anybody outside of the faith. Anybody, certainly really in America, but anyone really with any exposure to Christianity has heard this story, heard of this story. It is one of the miracles that's pointed to so often in Christianity. Not only that, it's also one of the only stories that in all four of the Gospels, these texts written about Jesus, it's one of the only situations where there's the same story in all of them. It's something that clearly is stuck with so many people for so many generations. And what I want to do is hopefully shed a little bit of new light on it, and then and if not that, then at least center our hearts on what the message the Bible is trying to get across here. It's over in Mark 6, and we're talking about Jesus feeding the 5,000. Now, right before this story, Jesus actually, he sends out his 12 people, kind of, if you view it like an internship or something like that, and he just says, hey, go ahead, preach the word, essentially do what I've been doing and do what I've showed you how to do. And you think his disciples, they went out and we'll find out, they had actually a lot of success. They were really probably excited coming back, certainly a bit exhausted coming back. I hope as we read today that you see shades of yourself and shades of even of what we're going through in this holiday season, and then even as we springboard into 2021. But basically his disciples come back and Jesus is talking to them now. It's in Mark 6, and in verse 30, it just says, the apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going, and that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. Pause here, and there's some emotional stuff going on. These disciples go out and preach, and then we're interjected with either this is right about the time that John the Baptist, one of Jesus's closest friends, was beheaded, or if nothing else, it was when Jesus heard about this beheading as well. So one of Jesus's closest friends, the guy who actually baptized Jesus, he was beheaded, and totally unjustly. His disciples come back and they've preached the word. Everybody needs a little bit of rest right now. And certainly I would hope that this holiday season has this Christmas season and then into the New Year's is a little bit of time for rest. I understand that even the working period, maybe you go back to work tomorrow, but I've been there. It's a little gimmicky for these 3 days kind of between now and New Year's Eve. You're just there trying to clock in so you don't waste your sick days or anything like that. But hear me now. Hopefully this time's a little bit of rest. And I know the life of a Christian is certainly, it ought to be marked with times of rest or quiet places or quiet times. There ought to be some white space in our lives. The fear that I have as I look at society is that there's just not that much quiet space. As I view it, hear me now, I think 2020, if it didn't cause us to slow down a little bit, then I think we've missed a little bit. You think about this idea of rest, and it's nothing to be ashamed about. His disciples are literally saying, they're tired, and he says, "Hey, come, you guys got to get some rest, and we all got to get some rest." It's nothing to be ashamed of if you're a follower of Jesus to get some rest. This go is just not healthy. I think about this idea of a business card, and so you should be able to see on the bottom right now. There's a little business card that is like the ugliest business card you could ever imagine. It's a bunch of different colors. You have no idea what's going on. I don't know who Corey Chapin is. I just got this from Google, but it's clearly somebody who needs a little bit of help creating a good business card. There's not too much white space in this business card. And then you think about something like this, where there's a clear message and a clear focus, and yet it leaves so much room where there's empty space, and this empty space can be filled up, and it's very attractive. I think if we're going to be those who are helping other people, then our lives ought to look attractive, and it's not through all the glitz and glam and money. It is through this connection to God and this ability to create white space in our lives. We're in different places. I know that I feel like I had way more white space before a child, but then it just, what it means is just a little bit more creativity as I view it, a little bit of time that I can, pass Jordan off. Bianca does such a great job, but pass Jordan off to Bianca for an hour or so. I go for a walk, or same thing in the morning. If I can grab Jordan and give Bianca a little bit of time to connect with God, a little bit of time to rest, is going to be super, super helpful. I know if we're going to do everything that God has us do. And so let's keep reading here. This idea of rest is one that we're going to see throughout this whole narrative. And then at the end, I think the rest is going to be a little bit different than at least how I've traditionally read it. It says in Mark 6:33, and this rest is intended to reignite then our compassion. It says, "But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began to teach them many things." I'll pause here. So you think about being so tired in a place of pure exhaustion, certainly for his disciples. And you guys have been there. I know I've been there. There's times when I maybe it's a workout, or maybe it's some kind of season, and maybe you're just finishing up finals if you're in school, or you're finishing up a big project at work. And there's this feeling of I can look towards the finish line. And if I can just get to the finish line, I'll be able to breathe and I'll be able to relax. And this would probably be what it was like for them, that they're like, if I just get to the finish line, I'll be able to relax, I'll be able to breathe. And then this finish line keeps moving progressively further and further out. Jesus's disciples aren't given that opportunity. It just says, though, that there's this large crowd that's followed, and the word that's used that I sit with, that you ought to sit with as well, is this word that says compassion. It says that he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And so he began teaching them many things. The other narratives will say he began teaching and healing their sick as well. He just saw them, and his heart went out for them. This idea of rest, the worldly idea of rest, I would say, is to disengage, and the spiritual idea of rest is actually to maybe rest for a bit or disengage for a little bit, but it's always with the purpose of re-engaging again. And so in this next few days between now and the new year, I hope you get a time to rest, but I hope it's prompting you then to engage in the spiritual battle. This word compassion is one that is so deep and so rich as we understand it in English, certainly, but even in the Greek that it's written in. It's a word that literally meant from like the inside of you. You guys have been there. Maybe you see a very difficult situation, or you pass by somebody in the road and your stomach drops and your heart sinks, or maybe you hear about a sudden death and your heart just drops. And this is the compassion. That's what the word literally meant. Everything inside of him, he physically felt hurt that he saw these people in a tough situation. And now sit with me here. What does it say though? It doesn't say that he saw these people in a tough situation and because they were poor, because they didn't have any money, they didn't have any hope. No. He says they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. And I think it's a lesson for you and I. This is a different kind of compassion than one that would say those who are physically in need, we have to give to them. Certainly that is true because he did heal their sick. That's absolutely true. He also taught them many things. And for you and I would say that a measure of this compassion is not going to be by how much we serve the poor. Hear me now. That is a measure of compassion. That's not what this is talking about necessarily right now, though. I would say this is a measure of how we actually see people. You look at some of the most prominent people, and we ought to see them as harassed and helpless, not because we were looking down on them, but because either we are in the spot of feeling harassed and helpless, or we too were there at a certain point in our lives. This idea of compassion, though, is one that looks way past the physical situation that individuals are in, and way more on the spiritual realities that they are living in. And so this is then how I think we ought to measure the compassion that we have, this kind of compassion. And I think it's by what we consume. If you know everything about who's dating who in Hollywood, if you know this basketball player's stats by heart, and if you're so deeply ingrained in that society, amen. But if you were to interact with a person, the first thing you can think of is, let me get a picture with you, or how do I, and not, let me find a way to share my faith with the person, then I think you've missed it. I would say that you don't have the compassion that Jesus had in this situation to see past what people look like physically and way more into where their spiritual well-being is. Your compassion then is driven more by your consumption of media than the Bible itself. Another measure of this kind of compassion is it's by the love that you have for those who think differently than you about big situations or big issues. By the love that you have for those who think differently than you about politics, about race, about what to do about this virus. And what do I mean when I say that? Well, think about this. If you're positive that you're right in your view of these things, if you are absolutely sure that you have a monopoly on the worldview of these difficult situations, these complicated situations, then what you ought to do is spend a bunch more time loving people and helping them to see it your way, perhaps, than ostracizing them and isolating yourself from them. And if you're not sure that you have everything totally on right, if there's a chance you could be wrong, or there's a chance that somebody could share some new information that opens your eyes a little bit, and you say, well, I don't have a monopoly on the knowledge that it takes to understand these complicated issues, well, then you which is probably honestly the place that you should be in, the one that's open to learning more and to being proven wrong, then you shouldn't be so passionate about it. It shouldn't be something that causes a divide between you and another group of people. This is the compassion that Jesus had, point blank, period. Do you see those in power as being harassed and helpless? Think about your boss, and maybe you have an awesome boss, maybe you don't have an awesome boss, but do you see him or her as being harassed and helpless? You think about your favorite celebrity, think about your favorite athlete. Do you actually see them as being harassed and helpless? Maybe the person that writes all these amazing books, or the one that everybody knows, do you see them as being harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd? Do you see everyone in politics, hear me now, not one side or the other, do you see those people as being harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd? This is the compassion that Jesus had. This is the compassion that if we're going to be those who feed 5,000, certainly literally, but also proverbially, then we have to have the same kind of compassion. We have to strive towards it. So as we reignite our compassion through rest, let's keep reading here. We're going to read a little bit more now in Mark 6. It says, this is the part that we need to take ownership and do some work. Here we go. We're in Mark 6 and 35. It says, by this time it was late in the day, so his disciples came to him. This is a remote place, they said, and it's already very late. Send the people away so they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. The disciples saw that there was an issue and said, okay, this is the only solution I can think of to the issue. Send them away. We got to get our rest is how I read in between the lines. And perhaps I'm reading too much, but it says, then he answered, you give them something to eat. And there's an emphasis here, not only in the English, but also in the Greek. There's an emphasis on this word you, that you give them something to eat. They said to him, that would take more than half a year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat? Sometimes you wonder, why would Jesus even have the confidence to send these people out, right? And we'd be right in the same boat. I know I'd be the one to ask in a way that seems like I have a genuine concern, but more than likely I'm just trying to prove somebody wrong. And Jesus says, well, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. They found out, they said 5 and 2 fish. Then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So first he says, you give them something to eat. Then he gives them away to give them something to eat, but he gives them some specifics to do. Go ahead and have them sit down. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 baskets full of broken pieces of bread and fish. The number of men who had eaten was 5,000. What an amazing story. We have no idea, really. It doesn't go into detail. I'd love to one day, we're going to ask, hey, how did you do that? What did it look like? Was it as you sent the people out? Then did you come up with more? Or was it just like you just kept reaching in a basket and there's another loaf, another? I have no idea. Neither do you, but it's going to be fun. And it's fun to think about asking Jesus, hey, what'd you do? Right now, this would be late in the day. It's about 3 p.m. is what late in the day was. Some college students would be saying, well, that's when my day starts. And so amen to that. But I guess so. It's late in the day for them. Maybe it'd be getting dark at that time, just about. These disciples, it's clear they didn't have yet this compassion that Jesus has. They knew that there was a need and they saw a need, but they didn't take it upon themselves right away to meet that need. In fact, it's identifying a need, but choosing let them figure that out. That's a tough thing. I'm gonna disengage and let whoever else figure it out. I'm tired. I don't have the energy to do it. It's one thing really to identify a problem. It's another entirely to be a part of the solution and to be a part of the solution to bring people closer to God, give people who are harassed and helpless what they need to no longer be harassed and helpless. And then I'm really drawn just this idea of Jesus saying, you give them something to eat. And so it's not just this ownership of seeing the problem, but there's also, there's somehow there's work involved in it. And I think historians have struggled with this. Theologians have struggled with this. Well, what does this mean then? Does it mean that we have to be the ones that do the work, or that we have to be, or that you can go to one side and say, well, we have to be the ones to do the work. We have to do this right, and we have to do this right, and we have to do this right, and we have to listen. And you can go down that path, or you can go down a path that says, well, we can't do anything. It's just God entirely. And so there's no point to even really try. God's going to do what God's going to do. And I don't know about you, but as I think about this, the biggest thing I realize is that God's going to do what he's going to do. And certainly he doesn't need me to do it, but I really want to be a part of what God is going to do. It's so true. You don't have to turn there, but you can write down, in Luke 19, Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem. The Pharisees are speaking about him in a negative way, and people are singing Hosanna, and it's this powerful It's this powerful literature that's actually fulfilling some prophecy. The Pharisees are like, what's going on? And Jesus just says, hey, if these people don't sing praise in my name, then even the stones are going to cry out. And you're like, okay, man, he doesn't need us, right? And then you think about it's in Matthew 3 that it's said that out of these stones we can raise up Abraham's descendants. These Israelites who were Abraham's descendants were supposed to be some of the people that were those that brought joy or brought peace or brought a sense of normalcy and a sense of Jesus's mission, really. God's mission for society, and they didn't do that, and so he's just saying, hey, wait, I can raise up children from these stones. So hear me, Jesus doesn't need us. He didn't need those disciples to do a miracle. I think he gave them the opportunity to be part of something so special, though. And for you and I, as we look at 2020, certainly, but then even towards 2021, I hope that we feel a sense of ownership and a sense of responsibility and just a sense of joy as we have the opportunity to be a part of the change for this whole world. Now, I bet you're wondering, or maybe you're not, I don't know. I bet you're wondering, we started talking about rest, and how did we end up here? Because everything that we've just talked about is the disciples doing things and spending a lot of energy and a lot of time. Well, let's keep reading here now. And as we read this, we're really going to build into a communion time. And so I'm going to read this, explain a bit, and then my sister, who's the only musical person in our entire family, is going to be strumming. She said barely. Is going to be strumming a little bit of guitar for us as we take communion. But we're not there yet. So we're wrapping it up, but not there yet. And we're talking about rest. This is the real kicker. As I was meditating on the scripture, my eyes were really opened up. It says in verse 45, so now they fed 5,000. You think about Jesus and the emotional spot that he's in. He learns about his, perhaps on this earth, the one that he can relate most closely with had just been beheaded unjustly. And then he feeds 5,000 people. This compassion is just oozing out of him. His disciples don't really understand even what's going on. You get the image of them just following just because, and they're really front line to this miracle that happens. But it just says immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to Bethesda while he dismissed the crowd. After leaving them, he went up on a mountainside to pray. Later that night, the boat was in the middle of the lake and he was alone on land. Think about why. They just must have listened to Jesus. He said, just go. And I wonder if they even had a second thought of how is he going to get to where we're going? Or maybe they were just too focused on themselves. Somebody said, don't worry about it. Let's just get in and let's just go to where we need to go. We're exhausted here. He saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. Shortly before dawn, he went out to them walking on the lake. He was about to pass by them. But when they saw him walking on the lake, so he's literally about to pass by him. He's like, I'm not going to give it any thought. They thought he was a ghost. They cried out because they all saw him and were terrified. Immediately he spoke to them and said, take courage, it is I, don't be afraid. Then he climbed into the boat with them and the wind died down. They were completely amazed, for they had not understood about the loaves. Their hearts were hardened. Okay, pause here. And so there's another narrative. So it's widely considered that Peter was the guy who kind of fed Mark a lot of this narrative of what took place. But then there's other narratives basically that would say that Peter was actually the one that said, hey, I'm going to come out to you, and you guys have heard it, and he doesn't. He makes it, and then he sinks, and so there's another story in there, but not for right now. This is really what I want to draw out. Jesus' disciples were looking for rest, and I would ask, which of them, Jesus or his disciples, ended the night more well rested? Now, it's easy to say Jesus ended the night. Of course, he ended the night more well rested. He's more spiritual. Yeah, but listen up, though. His disciples were concerned on this physical idea of rest, getting to where they needed to go, sitting down, certainly maybe taking a nap and relaxing. But what ended up is they ended up fighting against these waves in such a way that didn't provide them any kind of rest. Jesus, on the other hand, was concerned. I don't know how much longer he kept talking to the crowd, and he just missed them then. And then he left them and he went on the mountainside to pray. For you and I, so often the idea of rest, maybe you thought about it, maybe I certainly did as well, is spent by ourselves doing something that is focused on us or focused on just a couple of people that are immediately surrounding us. And that is the idea of rest. I would say for his disciples, they felt the same way. That's my idea. I need to get to where I need to go. Just breathe. Jesus' idea was not that, though. I believe Jesus was trying to show them the way that you're looking for rest, you're looking in all of the wrong places. You're trying to seek out this physical rest when in actuality, the spiritual rest is the one that's going to sustain you. Because looking for the physical rest, how often do you spend, or do I spend, I'm going to take a nap, and then you end up scrolling your phone on Instagram or Facebook or playing this mobile game, and you end up taking it's a 45-minute gaming session that you didn't intend to have happen. That's so often what physical rest does. And in reality, though, the spiritual rest that Jesus received, I believe he left that mountain in a more complete, more rested place than if he would have went with them on the boat. I think he's trying to show his disciples exactly what true rest really is. It says in Psalm 18:2, it just says, the Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God is my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. As we really consider, really wrap up the year 2020 and look to 2021, I want to challenge you to make time to rest, to create white space. If your life looks like the business card that we originally looked at, that's a problem. And I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying that's not good. It's not a good place for you to live for any length of time. So go ahead and make some time for some white space and make a decision to reignite the compassion in your heart. If you're not there yet, that's okay. Just make it a prayer this week, and maybe it'll end up being a prayer for forever. I want to see people how Jesus sees people. Harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd, certainly not looking down on them, understanding that without my connection to God, if I don't daily go to God, I'm also harassed and helpless, and I'm a sheep without a shepherd. And that's why I need to turn to God. Reignite this compassion, take ownership, and do the work of helping people to see what the reality is. And I think if we do that, if we continue to go back to God, I believe that we are going to find the rest that we are all searching for. I hope that 2020 was a year that forced you to rest. I know so many had an opportunity, and so many took the opportunity to come to God in the year 2020. I realize that. I know it was a year that people's eyes were open, but I just want us to look to 2021, and you see that there are going to be so many more that are desperately calling out to God, that desperately want to know what the truth is. We have the opportunity to bring them to that point. If you're listening in, if you sat with us for 30 minutes and you're not you just kind of stumbled upon it, good for you. That's awesome. I'm fired up. I want to challenge you to go ahead and reach out to the Facebook page, reach out. You can go to kalamazoo.church to hear a little bit more. We'd love to sit down, maybe on Zoom, perhaps not physically right now. We'd love to sit down on Zoom and chat a little bit, be able to open some scriptures with you, because I believe the Bible has all of the answers to life's most difficult problems. And when the world tries to isolate and make it A versus B, God just says, no, it's both together. We really have an opportunity to change the world. And as we begin to get in this process of taking communion, I really just want us to consider this is just one lesson that Jesus gave about rest. There's so many others that he just lived through his life. I wonder if his disciples, it took them from when he rose from the dead. And I wonder if then they started really calling out to God deeply in prayer, and they realized, wow, this is what true rest is. I'm doing way more work, but I feel way more rejuvenated. And this is what must have been some prayers he prayed on that mountain. And again, none of this is possible without Jesus dying on the cross and then raising from the dead.
Thank you so much for listening to the Kalamazoo Church of Christ podcast. If you're in the Kalamazoo area, we'd love to get connected. Please go to kalamazoo.church and fill in your information to come to a Sunday service or any other event that we have going on. In any case, you'll be hearing from us next week.
Too busy saving souls.